Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In the beating heart of New York, the golden light of the sunset reflected off the glass and steel facades of the skyscrapers. At the top of this bustling city, in a sumptuous villa nestled amidst an impeccably manicured garden, Richard Harrison, a billionaire known for his demands and legendary coldness, was preparing an extraordinary test for his only son. 20-year-old Ethan had grown up in luxury and comfort, surrounded by people who only showed him the image they believed would please him: beauty, wealth, appearance. Richard, tired of seeing his son fall into the traps of superficiality, decided to create a situation where his true character would be revealed. That evening, a dozen hand-picked models were expected in the grand salon, each dressed in elegant, shimmering gowns. Their mission: to seduce Ethan with everything that seemed alluring to the world. But among them was Clara, the housekeeper of the house, discreet, silent, who went unnoticed by everyone except Ethan. As the guests waited, Richard watched his son with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. The test was about to begin. "Choose your mother from among them," he announced firmly. A heavy silence fell. The models smiled confidently, some already ready to mock this simple rich boy. But Clara, true to herself, continued to work, humble and quiet, unaware that she had just become the center of the most important test of her life. And in this living room where opulence met vanity, Ethan would soon make a choice that would surprise everyone. The villa's wrought iron gate opened with a slight creak, letting in a cool late-afternoon breeze. A dozen luxury cars each dropped off a hand-picked model. High heels clicking on the cobblestone driveway, they entered the lobby with confidence, some staring at Ethan as if he were to admire them immediately. Each wore a designer gown, shimmering and perfectly tailored. The heavy, floral scent hung in the air, contrasting with the clean, sweet scent of fresh flowers arranged throughout the hall. The models exchanged mocking glances and calculated smiles. Some whispered to each other, giggling at the thought of this young heir's ridiculous test. In a discreet corner, Clara, the housekeeper, was taking care of the final details of the living room. Her simple, impeccable uniform could not compete with the brilliance of the dresses, but there was a natural grace in her posture. She was arranging a pile of cushions and straightening a slightly tilted vase, ignoring the tumult of the newcomers. Her gestures were precise, calm, imbued with a quiet dignity. Ethan stood by the fireplace, watching. His eyes didn't follow the glitter or the provocative glances, they were drawn to Clara's sincerity. She worked with a discreet smile, without pretense or calculation. In this world of appearances, her simplicity shone brighter than any designer gown. Richard, arms crossed, scrutinized his son, looking for a reaction, a clue about the direction his choice would take. He knew Ethan had grown up surrounded by privilege, but he wanted to see if his son could see true value beyond the trappings. The silence in the hall was broken by the heels of the approaching models, some smiling arrogantly, others trying to capture attention with forced compliments and studied gestures. But Ethan remained motionless, observant, his attention strangely diverted to Clara, who continued to work as if the world around her didn't exist. And it was in this striking contrast that the story was about to begin, between the superficial brilliance of the models and the discreet but sincere light of the cleaning lady. The villa's grand living room was bathed in the warm glow of crystal lamps. The models had gathered around Ethan, each sporting a calculated smile and perfect posture, ready to seduce the young man with everything they believed was irresistible: beauty, charm, and flattery. "Hello, Ethan," one of them said with an overly polite smile. "We hope you like it." "Yes, we can't wait to find out what you're looking for in a mother," added another, in a tone that oscillated between defiance and mockery. Ethan watched them silently. Each one tried to capture his attention with compliments, suggestive glances, or theatrical gestures. But none of these artifices succeeded in awakening anything in him. They seemed superficial, devoid of any real substance. Meanwhile, Clara walked past him to straighten a slightly crumpled rug. Ethan looked at her for a moment and noticed something no one else saw: the serenity in her gestures, the sincerity of her discreet smile, the attention she paid not only to her work, but to everything around her. As another candidate gave him a flirtatious look, Ethan found himself averting his eyes to follow Clara, who continued her task with ease and dignity. He felt a strange attraction not to her beauty or appearance, but to her simplicity and quiet grace. The models, noticing that Ethan wasn't responding to their advances, exchanged worried glances. Some whispered among themselves, mocking this difficult boy. But Ethan, on the contrary, felt increasingly clear in his judgment. He knew that the true choice would not be made in artifice, but in the heart and character of the person. And so Ethan's dilemma emerged: follow his father's expectations and choose among the models, or follow his instincts and recognize the value of the one no one considered, Clara, the housekeeper, discreet but luminous in her simplicity. As the models vied with each other to attract Ethan's attention, an unexpected incident occurred. A small vase of flowers, improperly placed on the coffee table, tipped over and lightly hit the floor. The noise echoed throughout the large living room. Without hesitation, Clara knelt down quickly to pick up the vase. Ethan rushed to help her, but she stopped him with a gentle gesture. "Leave it to me, Mr. Ethan." "It's nothing," she said with a warm smile. He observed her face closely and was struck by the sincerity emanating from her eyes. Where models used calculated smiles, studied glances, and theatrical gestures, Clara shone with her simplicity and natural kindness. She wasn't trying to impress, she did what felt right. "Thank you, Clara," Ethan said, genuinely touched. "It's normal, sir. I'm just doing my job," she replied humbly. At that moment, Ethan sensed a stark contrast between the models and Clara. The former tried to shine with artifice, sumptuous clothes, and calculated compliments. Clara, on the other hand, radiated an authentic light, invisible to everyone else, but impossible for him to ignore. The models, noticing that Clara was receiving Ethan's attention, exchanged worried and contemptuous glances. They whispered behind their hands, "How can he be attracted to her?" But Ethan didn't see a housekeeper. He saw a person with a genuine heart and soul, someone who wasn't playing a role, someone who wasn't trying to please out of ambition or self-interest. At that moment, he understood that true beauty was not measured in designer dresses, glittering heels, or studied manners. It lay in simplicity, sincerity, and caring for others. And it was there, in this small, banal but revealing gesture, that Ethan felt the certainty dawn within him that his choice would not follow the rules imposed by luxury or superficiality. The large living room was now filled with palpable tension. The models, who had previously displayed confidence and poise, were beginning to lose their poise. Ethan continued to observe Clara closely, and this simple gesture of interest was enough to shake their arrogance. "How can he look?" she whispered one of the models, a fake smile on her face. "He must be making fun of us," another whispered, slightly panicked. The whispers and accusatory looks multiplied. Some tried to regain control, throwing exaggerated compliments at Ethan, trying to distract him. They smiled, waved their hands, and spoke theatrically. But Ethan, impassive, didn't react to their artifices. Meanwhile, Clara continued her work with calm and precision, as if in a bubble of her own, oblivious to the commotion around her. She arranged the cushions, replaced a vase, and wiped the table with the same serenity that had captivated Ethan. Every movement seemed measured by dignity rather than a desire to impress. Richard Harrison, sitting in his imposing armchair, frowned. He was surprised by his son's reaction. Ethan wasn't seduced by the superficial charms of the models. The billionaire, who had thought his son's choice would be obvious and predictable, was beginning to sense that this experiment was about to take an unexpected turn. The models, seeing that Ethan wasn't giving in, exchanged frustrated glances. The competition, until then dominated by appearances, was losing its meaning. Their arrogance was beginning to turn into concern, as they understood that Ethan was seeking something that money and beauty couldn't buy: authenticity. And in this stark contrast, artifice versus simplicity, vanity versus sincerity, Ethan gradually understood that his heart was already making a choice no one had anticipated. The living room's silence hung for a moment. All the models held their breath, some with forced smiles, others with wide-eyed surprise. Richard Harrison, his face set and his arms crossed, watched his son with an intensity that hung heavy in the air. Ethan took a deep breath and turned to his father, his voice calm but assured. "I choose Clara." Shock rippled through the room. The models burst out laughing, some almost hysterically. "What?" one exclaimed, unable to hide her indignation. "Are you kidding?" Others exchanged incredulous glances, their arrogant smiles turning into expressions of confusion and anger. Clara, surprised, stopped in her tracks and looked up at Ethan. Her cheeks flushed slightly pink. She didn't understand why she, a simple cleaning lady, was the center of this sudden attention. Richard frowned and stood up, his deep voice echoing through the living room. "Ethan, you can't be serious. All these women have everything it takes to be perfect according to you, Dad," Ethan interrupted, "but perfection isn't measured by wealth or appearance. Clara is sincere, generous, and true. That's what I respect and what I want in my life." Silence fell again, even heavier than before. The models, humiliated, lowered their eyes. They realized that their beauty and status were worthless compared to sincerity and kindness. Clara, moved but proud, caught her breath and whispered, I didn't expect that." Ethan approached quietly, placing a friendly hand on her shoulder. "You should never underestimate your worth, Clara. I saw it from the start." Richard, still thoughtful, felt a strange pride mixed with surprise. Perhaps his son had just taught him a lesson that money and power could not buy. True discernment comes from the heart, not from artifice. And so, in this grand living room where luxury and superficiality reigned, Ethan made a choice that would upset everyone's expectations. He chose heart over appearance, authenticity over vanity. Richard Harrison, despite his growing respect for his son's judgment, could not let what he still considered an impulsive decision go unchallenged. His brow furrowed and his voice took on a firm tone. "Ethan, you have to understand that this choice will have consequences. This girl, this cleaning lady, she doesn't have the education or the status to fit into this world. Why should I accept that?" Ethan didn't back down. His eyes shone with a calm, sincere determination. "Dad, I understand your concerns. But Clara may not have the title or the luxury, but she has something no one here has, integrity and a true heart. If you want me to live happily, you must respect that." The models, still present, seemed stunned. They expected Richard to impose his will and for their favorite's choice to be validated. But Ethan, true to form, defied the hierarchy and the opinions of others. Richard sighed, pacing around the living room, trying to gauge the magnitude of the situation. Then he turned to Clara, who stood straight but humble, as if she knew this confrontation was inevitable. "Clara," he said slowly, "why should I believe you? Why should I accept you as part of my family?" Clara, with a serene look, replied gently, "Mr. Harrison, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm simply doing what's right and honest. My background, my status, or my clothes don't matter. What matters is what I do with my heart." Richard remained silent for a long moment, weighing each word. He gradually understood that his son's lesson was clear: neither money, nor luxury, nor appearance define a person's worth. Ethan had chosen based on his instincts and his values, and he was ready to defend that choice. Finally, Richard sat down heavily in his chair, a mixture of respect and reluctance in his eyes. "All right, Ethan. If you're sure of your choice, then I'll respect it, but know that this won't be easy for you or for her." Ethan smiled, not out of defiance, but out of gratitude. Clara, touched by this recognition, understood that despite the obstacles, their bond had just begun on a solid foundation: mutual respect and authenticity. The days following Ethan's decision were filled with whispers and curiosity in the villa. The models, humiliated by the young man's unexpected choice, had left the house, leaving behind a silence mixed with surprise and disbelief. But for Ethan and Clara, a new stage was beginning, getting to know each other for real. One afternoon, while Ethan was talking with his father in the study, Clara came in to drop off some documents she had found misplaced. Richard, still intrigued, couldn't help but watch her discreetly. He was beginning to understand that Clara was not simply a cleaning lady, she possessed a practical intelligence, humility, and moral sense that far surpassed the superficiality of the candidates. "Clara," Richard said, breaking his silence, "how did you manage to remain so calm and dignified in a place full of people looking down on you?" Clara smiled softly, without arrogance or pride. "Mr. Harrison, I never came into this world to impress anyone. I learned to work hard, stay honest, and help others when I can. I believe a person's worth is measured by their actions and their heart, not by their appearance." Richard nodded, impressed despite himself. He felt Clara's words contained a truth he had long ignored. His daughter, society, and even his business had never emphasized these simple yet powerful qualities. Ethan, standing next to Clara, felt his admiration grow. It wasn't just Clara's sincerity that attracted him, but also her quiet strength and ability to remain herself in the face of opulence and arrogance. "Dad," Ethan said softly, "now do you see why I chose her? She's not trying to be someone she's not. She's whole, and that's exactly what I respect the most." Richard finally smiled, a rare and genuine smile. He understood that his son's choice wasn't simply a rebellion or a mistake, it was a life lesson. He began to realize that authenticity and a pure heart could surpass anything money and status could offer. And as Clara continued to work with her usual grace, Richard felt a deep respect grow within him for this woman who, through her simplicity and dignity, had already changed his son's perception, and his own. The next morning, the villa's grand living room looked different. The furniture gleamed in the soft sunlight, and an atmosphere of calm and reflection reigned. Richard Harrison, sitting in his imposing armchair, watched his son and Clara with a mixture of respect and contemplation. The models had left the villa the day before, some furious, others silently ashamed. They had realized, too late, that their beauty and status were not enough to seduce Ethan. The contrast between their arrogance and Clara's simplicity had only accentuated the lesson Richard himself was beginning to learn. "Ethan," Richard said to his son, "I have to admit, you were right. I was blinded by luxury and appearance. But Clara, she showed me that true merit lies in the heart and actions, not in titles or beauty." Clara, who was still arranging some cushions in the living room, looked up and smiled softly. "Mr. Harrison," she replied, "I've never set out to impress anyone. I simply do what I feel is right." Richard nodded. He felt an important lesson had just been imprinted on his mind. He had learned something not only about others, but also about himself. His relentless pursuit of social perfection and status had often prevented him from recognizing the value of people for who they truly were. Ethan, standing next to Clara, felt a quiet pride. Her choice had not only surprised his father, it had transformed his perception of the world and of true wealth. "Dad," Ethan said, "that's what real luxury is, authenticity, sincerity, and respect. That's what Clara represents, and that's what I wanted to choose." Richard finally smiled, a genuine smile, rare and deep. He understood that the most precious thing in life is not measured in dollars or appearances, but in the ability to love and recognize the value of others for who they truly are. And in this grand salon where luxury had long dictated the rules, a new lesson had emerged: true wealth lies in the heart, not in the superficial adornments of the world. In the following days, the villa, once filled with tension and competition, regained a lighter, warmer atmosphere. Ethan and Clara spent time together, gradually discovering each other's personalities and values. Every gesture, every smile strengthened the bond that was beginning to form between them. Clara, despite her role as a housekeeper, didn't hesitate to share her ideas and advice with Ethan. She spoke wisely about life, simplicity, and the importance of staying authentic, qualities that role models and high society had never been able to teach her. Ethan, for his part, showed her that wealth and privilege could be used to protect, support, and enhance what truly matters. Richard, watching the scene from his office, felt a mixture of pride and surprise. He realized that his son's choice was not only a lesson for him, but an example for the entire family. Authenticity and sincerity surpass anything money or status can offer. The models, meanwhile, had left the villa forever. Their arrogance and superficiality had been exposed by the simple choice of a sincere heart. Their failure resonated as a reminder that true worth is not measured by appearance or wealth, but by dignity and respect for others. One evening, as they gazed together at the garden illuminated by the soft lights of the villa, Ethan took Clara's hand. "Thank you for being yourself," he said softly. Clara smiled, a smile filled with tenderness and serenity. "And thank you for seeing me as I am, without mask or artifice." At that moment, Ethan understood that true happiness lay not in appearances or material possessions, but in the ability to recognize and cherish what is authentic. The bond between him and Clara became the foundation for a future built on trust, sincerity, and mutual respect. The villa, a symbol of wealth and power, was no longer just a place of luxury, it had become the setting for a timeless lesson about the heart, value, and true love. As the weeks passed, life in the villa took on a new rhythm. Ethan and Clara's relationship grew stronger, based on respect, complicity, and genuine affection. The young man's choice had shattered everyone's expectations, but it had also opened a new perspective on what wealth and true luxury meant. Richard Harrison, once obsessed with status and appearances, observed his son with a mixture of pride and humility. He understood that the most important lessons are not transmitted through money, titles, or material possessions, but through the heart and values. Clara had taught this through her simple presence and authenticity. The models, whose pride had been tested, had left the city, leaving behind a bitter memory. Their arrogance had been unable to withstand the truth. True beauty lies in sincerity and respect for others, not in artifice. Ethan and Clara were building a future together. Each day brought small victories, moments of complicity, and the certainty that their choice was not a whim, but the fruit of deep and sincere discernment. One evening, Richard approached them in the garden illuminated by the soft lanterns. "You both taught me something I never imagined," he said, his voice calm but full of emotion. "True wealth is not what you have, but what you embody." Ethan smiled at Clara, and she responded with a slight nod. Together, they understood that their happiness depended neither on titles nor appearances, but on a genuine heart, capable of love and respect. Thus, in this villa, once dominated by luxury and superficiality, a new wealth had emerged, that of authenticity, sincerity, and true love. A heritage of the heart, timeless and precious, that neither money nor power could ever buy. And as the sun set over New York, illuminating the city in a golden light, Ethan and Clara's story reminded everyone that true luxury lies in the ability to see beyond appearances and choose what truly matters.